Okay. Well, thank you. It's really nice to be back. I must admit, I've been semi-hibernating from Q. I'm one of the Q members who works across multiple sectors, and I sometimes feel a bit of an imposter, to be honest. But I'm not a health professional, but I'm a knowledge management, organizational learning, end of improvement professional, and somehow I blagged my way into Q when maybe when the bar was lower, and they let everybody in. It was really fun to be part of. I think it was the very first Q exchange round, actually, Matthew, that this particular approach was successful in, and that was kind of the birth of something that I just wanted to update you with and share with you today, because it's one of those projects that got started under Q Exchange and it got to a point of almost getting into that critical mass, and then a whole bunch of things happened that meant it could have got frozen. So the idea that we can potentially dust it off and restart it and re-energize it, and maybe some of you are in a position in the future to take it forward or build on the work that was done, that would be brilliant, because other than that, it's literally shelfware in my office, which you can see behind me at the moment. So let me start with a little bit of an introduction, and I'll show you a few slides, and we've got plenty of time to talk stuff through as well. This is, there we go, this is me according to the Q website. As I say, I work across multiple sectors, and this particular methodology, for want of a better word, is something that does come from other sectors and is used widely in other sectors, the sort of the visual aspect of this. So it'd be good to talk you through that. I'm based in Exeter, but work sort of globally. As I say, it's really nice just to dip back into some Q stuff for a little bit. That's, you can look me up by all means later on, and please feel free to contact me if you want a bit of direct follow-up or something you forgot to ask, or via Matthew. I really don't mind. Very open to comms. So here's my suggestion for kind of just what I wanted to update you on, because I'm assuming that of the people who are on this call, some of you maybe were even around back in 2018, 2019 when this was a program and a project, and a bit of a funded idea. Some of you will have just maybe been evangelized by Matthew since that moment to say, oh, you need to know about this because it was really cool and we got it started. And some of you maybe are just interested in maybe different ways of engaging groups to think about quality improvement, and just up for a lunchtime chat. So wherever you are on that little list of participants, let me sort of tell you the story, if you like, of this work, how it came into being and where it got to, and some of my thoughts about, oh, if there was some more resource to do something, this would be the next 2 or 3 steps we could do. But you'll have other ideas as well, and I'll shut up at that point and let you and Matthew take it forward. This was the very original, back in the day when this was pitched as a Q Exchange project. This was the title, slightly clumsy title to be honest, of the proposal, which was to bringing a QI capability model, maturity model, to life, and using it for what I call bench learning in the Q community beyond. So using it as a diagnostic, informally, across the trust represented by members of the Q community, to identify positive deviance and to use that as a springboard for learning from each other. Because one of the challenges I guess I've always found is within any group of professionals working in a certain area, in the absence of any official standard or model, which is sort of detailed and meaningful, we all have our own versions of what good looks like. So when you're part of Q, and I think the next slide probably says this, yeah, when you're part of the Q community, to find the perfect connection, that trust or person who's just a couple of steps ahead of you, and they're working in a similar context or culture, and you both kind of speak the same language about what you're doing, it was always quite hard. And even back in the day when this was written, you can see only 1,400 Qs to meet. Now it's closer to 5,000, I'm guessing, Matthew. The Q community is a bit of an you never know you've met all the right people with Q. And so the idea behind this particular approach was, if we can create together, and that was important, we can co-create a common language, a common model that describes what good looks like around QI, breaks it down into meaningful capabilities that we can all recognize and agree. And we've all got skin in the game. We've all had a role in helping create the model which we're going to use, so we don't spend all our time critiquing it, then we're in a much better position to do some bench learning, some comparing, some offer, some requests, some sharing, all the social knowledge-y stuff that requires the foundations of a common language. Otherwise, we're down to randomized coffee trials, and it takes a long time to bump into the right people. So this was an attempt to turbocharge that by giving us a bit of a common language. So yeah, that was the third part of the little proposal thing, and it uses a particular approach which was referred to, and this will become clear in the visuals as we get going, much to Lindsay's delight, a thing called the Q river, or the river diagram, which is just a visual particularly for throwing a spotlight on positive deviance, I guess, and giving I guess a bit of an extra metaphor to work with. So that was kind of the background. It was, how can we help unleash the power of Q, if you like, by helping me find the right people to learn from, because we have a common language and we can talk more directly. And if we're a community of practice, it's about getting clarity around what that practice really looks like, which is always a good start for any community of practice in my book. This was and you can see I'm going back in time because the slides are the old shaped slides. This was part of the initial sort of presentation to get people thinking. It was all about, how could we create a common language that crosses the divide, if you like, between different people who think they're talking about the same thing, but they've never actually agreed on what that same thing looks like, or never mind broken it down into bite-sized chunks, never mind defined what good looks like and all the levels up to what good looks like. So lots of scaffolding, if you like, that could be constructed if you can get the right people in a room to do it. And this was part of the presentation I gave to tell a story from a very different context, going back quite a way now, actually. But it was where this methodology was originally born, or that's not quite true. It was actually born by a colleague and myself working in BP. I know I'm not proud of it now, but back in the days, it wasn't quite such a shame-ridden organization. And we were trying to find ways to get operational excellence conversations running across this global oil company. And in the middle of doing all that and becoming known for doing that and writing stuff about that, the United Nations got in touch with BP and said, hey, we'd actually love you to send one of your people, and my colleague Jeff went to do this, to work with us to help us apply some of your knowledge sharing ideas around something that really matters, rather than getting more oil out of the ground and destroying the environment. Oh, sorry, it's been recorded. Shouldn't have said that. Anyway, so the work went, Jeff went to the UN AIDS program to apply exactly the same thing we've been doing inside BP. And it hinged on getting professionals and getting stakeholders who have different angles on a particular issue to talk about what good looks like and agree on a model. And with working with UN AIDS and the AIDS crisis in the early part of this century, the first thing Jeff did was to try and work with this group to build a common language. And the issue that was described to him was, look, there are certain outliers in the world where the response to HIV is different to the response you might have in other cities or countries. And in this case, Thailand is seeing a massive fall off in terms of HIV prevalence, whereas most cities were pretty much flatlining on that. So what was Phayao in Thailand, apologies for the pronunciation if that is incorrect, what were they doing that was different to the others? And without a common language or framework to talk about, what are you doing to prepare and respond to HIV in your city? It was very hard to find that. So Jeff's initial step was, well, let's work with people living with AIDS, NGOs, the UN, others who have skin in the game, to build a really simple model, so it's about as simple as they get, that you can put on one sheet of paper, that you can use in the field, that breaks down the key capabilities to respond to HIV and gives you a 1 to 5 scale. So if you're familiar with maturity models, this is kind of a maturity model at 90 degrees to make it fit on this particular format of paper, but the principles was the same. Level 1 is very basic, level 5 was pretty good. And you can see the various categories, the things which a community or a city should be thinking about and maybe measuring themselves against, having conversations about in order to respond to and prepare for the response to HIV. So here is that model being used out in Uganda, another wider group using the same process. So Jeff went out for his year out of BP, traveled bits of the world with UNAIDS to introduce this process. And the idea was, very simply, when you get together a cross-section of stakeholders, you have a conversation about how are we doing? Where would we score ourselves on this? And then they begin to say, oh, we think we're level 2 on this one. And, we're level 4 on inclusion. We do quite well in terms of involving people in the solution. And so on and so forth. They work through the other remaining measures and agree, hopefully, or talk about disagreement, which is helpful, on where they currently score themselves. So each city in this bit of work Jeff did would have its own unique set of scores, its own sort of unique kind of heartbeat, if you like. And when you begin to capture those heartbeats on a very, very simple chart like this, you can begin to build up a picture. So this is Mei Chen. You see they have strengths and weaknesses, very good on learning and transfer, not so good on mobilizing resources. And then you begin to layer in some of the other cities. Very quickly, you build up something which becomes harder and harder to read. And you think, what on earth is this telling us? So what Jeff did then was to say, well, actually, and this is applying the model that we did in BP, let's just look at the spread for a minute. Let's sort of hide away the detail and just look at the range, the minimum to maximum capability of all of the cities who've used this same assessment, and many of whom were involved in creating it. And with a little bit of imagination, so that blue area represents the spread. It's the envelope of performance, if you like, where somebody has a score, and Mei Chen can now see where they lie relative to this backdrop of everybody else's capability. So they can see it at a glance. So they're probably the best or equal best at learning and transfer and ways of working, and one of the lowest performing around acknowledgement and mobilizing resources. And if you use some imagination and a bit of metaphor and color in the other areas green, the areas where nobody is scoring, no one's this bad on the bottom end, and no one's this good on the north. And if you imagine you're flying over a river that's burst its banks in some areas, you get the idea that where the metaphor was born from. And the north bank, if you like, is the bank of high performance, high capability that people want to reach. And the south bank is the bank of lower capability, which really, if you really push the metaphor, you want to be laying up some sediment against this bank and gradually moving northwards. And in an ideal world, in a learning organization or a learning community where there's lots of knowledge sharing going on, the river, if you like, year over year, year on year, should be changing shape, and it should be gradually moving northwards. And in your idealized organization, you get a little canal running all the way along at level 5. You never get there because of the nature of spread and everything else. But that was kind of the theory. It just gave a bit of a metaphor. And they used to call it, in the UNAIDS environment, they call it the river of life, which is lovely. And I remember Jeff phoning me saying, I wish you could see this. We've got a community, lots of communities standing out, and the mango tree is level 5, and the school is level 1, and they're all literally marking out physically as people with ropes and stuff. So I wish I'd been there to see that, but I didn't get to see that. And then you can use it, as they did, not just as a diagnostic for how we're doing, but as a planning tool around, so what are our priorities for improvement? What do we want to change? So in this case, Mei Chen may say, well, these are the areas that we want to improve on. And so the next question then is, well, how do we learn from others who are in a different place to us on their journey of improvement, but maybe share the same priorities? Because it's quite nice to know, A, who are the outliers or the positive deviants that we can learn from, and B, who are the people like us who have a desire to improve on this one. So we're fellow travelers. We are on the same improvement journey with the same priorities, starting at a similar place. Those are good people to know. And if you were, imagine you could kind of take a slice through the river around, we'll just look at one category here, acknowledgement of HIV. Mei Chen has said we're at level 2, not doing so well there. We'd love to get to level 4, and we know that there's somebody at level 4 because the river bank is showing us that. We just don't know who it is. So the other part of this model was a thing they called the stairs diagram, which puts the names on that, and it gives you both dimensions. The y-axis is the same dimension you had on the river. It's how good are you? What level of maturity are you at? And the x-axis is, and how much did you want to improve? Is this a priority for you? So for Mei Chen, you can see in the big writing, level 2 in terms of capability, and want to improve by 2. So we want to get to level 4. So this begins to, if you like, separate the people who've been involved in self-assessing and using it as a diagnostic to say, well, if we can get the people in the red who've got a desire to improve with the people in the green who have definitely something to share, then we've got a potential marketplace for knowledge, if you like. We've identified the key players in a marketplace. And the people in the yellow, Palliser and Bouzier, it's just not their priority right now. That may change over the years, but right now they have other fish to fry. So that was kind of the idea between showing this, where are we and where do we want to get to model. And this is a workshop in Lyon that Jeff facilitated, had sort of 10 tables, one for each of the capabilities, people from 13 countries. Just couldn't stop them talking because for the first time they had this common language, and they could say, oh, I see where you are, you're here and you want to be to there, and magic. So knowing all this stuff and having some exposure to Q, I thought, wow, there's something in this that maybe might work for Q. So I sort of sold the concept in this presentation to the Q community. The way the UNAIDS stuff went on, they began to capture stories and examples. They had a website where you could click through acknowledgement and recognition, tell me about that. Oh, here's the next level of detail. Here's some examples, some principles, some stories, some videos of people talking about what they're doing. So it became a resource base, if you like, a little wiki almost around not just what's the model, but what are people's experiences and who can I contact to do that? And they built a little community of practice around that back in the day. So that was the UNAIDS story. So having shared that with the Q community and amazingly won some funding to run a project, what then happened? So I did the usual thing on Q Exchange. People signed up, and some people with a lot of experience in QI and thinking about capability and structuring QI signed up, including Joy Furnival, who many of you will know, who'd written a paper with Kieran Walsh and Ruth Bowden about, it was a meta-synthesis, a meta-analysis of other papers around QI capability. And she had strong views, as Joy did, around what this could look like. And with Kieran as well, we sort of met and they had an existing self-assessment, which we sort of used as a bit of a basis for this. Having worked with them, we then put out an invitation to the rest of the members, people who'd signed up as I like this, and beyond that, to come to a workshop up in Birmingham, I think it was, to spend a day working together, breaking this model down, thinking about what good looked like, and working, here they are, here's the group working on it, and building up a larger than life size model on the wall. We didn't do all 5 levels, so I just got the groups to come up with levels 1, 3, and 5, because you can always interpolate the bits in between. And they're still to be interpolated, I must admit. So we ended up on the day with a model. There's Matthew, look at that. A bit more hair than Matthew. Looking like this. And we all felt quite good about it. Of course, it had to then be tuned and given a single voice and just made to feel like a more consolidated, consistent model. And some of the categories needed a little bit of fine tuning. So there was 2 things we did. We did a bit of finessing to make it feel better, and we also looked at the habits of an improver, just to see are we covering the bases that were covered in that sort of seminal work as well. So you can see the left-hand side was all the headings that we looked at in the workshop with a bit of, oh, this needs to go there, we need to merge these 2, and then the middle column was the final set of capabilities, and the high level, the 1 to 8, the stakeholder and supplier focus, organizational culture, they were consistent with the Furnival, Walsh, Bowden paper. We didn't want to mess with that particularly. It would have opened up too many difficult conversations. So we went with that as a good generic framework, because it's pretty wide and you can fit most things under it. So that was the model, and it ended up looking a bit like this. So out of that workshop, with a bit of finessing, we had a big model that had levels 1, 3, and 5 for all those areas. And then we said, well, that's great, but models really aren't that exciting unless you're particularly wired in a certain way. So the next question was, well, where do we go from here? What's the next step? How do we bring this thing to life? And the idea that came up, I may even be responsible for this idea, but the first draft of the idea was, well, maybe we can make this into some kind of an experience that people sit around. something you can put on a table in front of a team, give them the information, and spark a conversation about this. And the initial idea, which was finessed a little bit, was what if we were to make it into some kind of a game of poker where people had to place chips and cards and things. And so the idea was, we said, well, look, if we take our maturity model, and rather than having it on a massive set of sheets of paper with all the detail and a tiny font, what if we took each cell from the maturity model? Here's what level 5 for service user improvement looks like, and had a card with that on. So you turn your model into a deck of cards, okay, with a card for each cell. And then we had some poker chips for people to say, well, we know where we are, let's put the chips somewhere we'd like to be. And we had a big kind of board that laid out, here's our 17 capabilities grouped into the 8 sort of main categories, and people could then use that to place their chips. So it might work a bit like this. So here's some of the cards. As I say, we only had levels 1, 3, and 5, but you can see the sort of descriptions that were in there. And there's another set for leadership commitment. There we go. So this was sort of the language that the group came up with. And the idea then was, well, look, we've got this board that we're all sitting around and having a conversation as a group. So everyone's got their own little pack of cards. And when we'll go through it sort of section by section. And so for the very first one, I might say, I think we're at level 3 on this one. My other colleagues in the team might have different views, and they might place their cards on different parts of maybe just level 2 or level 4. So if we all went through that, if I did all my cards first and said, this is where I think we are, this is my perspective, and then the rest of the team put theirs on, there'll be some areas where we've got a little bit of disagreement or spread within the team, and great to talk about those things. And there'll be some area where there's a kind of a majority view, so we can use it as a way of getting at least kind of a current score for ourselves as an organization or a trust or whatever it might be, a team within a trust. And then we can say, that's great, but where would we prioritize improvement? And everyone has some little poker chips, and they play, I think it's 3 chips each, and you place your chips very democratically on the practice, the thing you think we should be focusing here. This is the biggest return on investment right now, return on effort. So in a nice kind of anonymous democratic way, you're getting a team to say, actually, this is where we think the prize lies if we put our effort here. Nobody knows which chips are whose, so it would work quite nicely for that. And then you can, so clearly you can see here from this little mock-up that there's sort of probably 3 main areas, I think, that have become the real kind of winners, if you like, that the team agreed on. So it does force a very democratic kind of decision-making. So these 3 areas feel like okay, if we focus here, we've at least got the whole team buying into it. But then the question, of course, is, well, how do we know what to do if we want to improve on these 3 things? So if you then, we'll just sort of move all the poker chips off the board for a minute and put into here the 3 cards, if you like, that tell us what level 5 for the first one looks like, and level 3 for the green one, and level 4 for the bluey one. And if you take one of those cards, let's do the yellow one, it gives you the description. But the description is fine, but it doesn't give me the tools to how I can improve. It doesn't help me get there. So on the reverse of the cards, we put a QR code. And if you scan the QR code, it then would take you to a folder within the Q information hierarchy, carefully managed by Matthew and the team, where there would be a folder with a whole bunch of useful stuff in it. There'd be a link to the river diagram, so you could see that actually the person I need to speak to is Adam Backhouse in North London, because he's got level 4 or level 5 for his particular trust. Or it might be there are some interesting information resources, or it might be there's a paper or a project or a group or a community I could join. So it becomes a way of signposting people to how they might get some help, whether it's tacit knowledge exchange through a conversation, whether it's explicit stuff through a documented knowledge, or something in between, something co-creative in the form of a community or other stuff. So that was the plan. We built the QR codes, we built the empty folder structure. We didn't fill up the empty folder structure, but we got as far as having everything laid out. Now, there was a bit of a conversation about poker not being necessarily a concept that works in all cultures, which is an absolutely fair point. So we backed off the poker chips thing and turned them into something a bit different. And we ended up saying, well, let's go back to the river thing. And the idea you've got to kiss lots of frogs to find your prince. And this idea of hopping across the river from level the south bank to the north bank. So let's have, so the idea was we had, actually, you can't see it on this picture, but the idea was the poker chips became little water lilies that you put onto this river. And you can see here how it worked laying out the card. So this was the final product. So here's the little, decks of cards look like this. And if I open like a magician here, pick a card, any card. So this is the whole model laid out. There we go, lots of lovely colors as cards, and on the back of the cards you've got the defunct QR codes, but that was the theory. And you would sit around and do that. Here's another picture, I think, of all of the cards laid out to give you an idea of how you can see the water lilies a bit better there. Here's another picture of again a team playing around with the cards. So everyone gets their little box of cards and people lay their cards out and use it as a planning tool. So that was the idea, and that was the prototype. We tried it with a rollout foamy mat, and we then tried it, but that was a bit big. So then we put it into a more manageable box, which I've got. Oh, there we go. Still quite heavy, but that's everything you need in one box for this version with all of the missing bits. And that's kind of where we got to. And there were some nice instructions that just helped people through the team. So it felt quite good. And then really, to be honest, the money had pretty much run out. In fact, it had long since run out at this point. But we managed to get to a point where I think 6 people got to test it. Here's the overall timeline. And you can see on the right-hand side, when we got the game produced in November, these are the people who still have, if they haven't thrown them away, copies of the game and were trying it out. That was where we got to, and we got some positive feedback. Minesh particularly found he used it at different levels within pool, and it actually found it very powerful. So what happened then? At that point, I think something happened centrally in NHS England, NHS Improvement, around the Developing People Improving Care project, and also there was some NHS Impact stuff happened. And we had to kind of just pause everything because there was a national top-down initiative that was happening, and this might have been a way to feed up from the bottom up. So I did go to their events and help them sort of build another model. But then, of course, this happened, and everything got thrown up in the air. And I have no idea what happened with DPIC or what happened with the other work that was around that. But I did ask a few questions afterwards, after never quite got a response. So as far as I'm aware, the work hasn't really gone any further, either as a national top-down level, I may be wrong here, or certainly at a bottom-up level. The work that was done through the Q community, done against the Furnival paper, to build something a bit more fun out of that, hasn't got any further. So if you said to me, what would the next steps be from your perspective, Chris? What would be the next things that would need to happen? I would say, firstly, it would be good just to revisit the model, not from first principles, I think, but just going back over some of the language, and definitely need to create the text for levels 2 and 4. And thankfully, since 2018, AI has proved itself to become very, very good, actually, at interpolating. I do this with a lot of different groups, and AI is brilliant at interpolating. Less good at coming up with the boundaries, but give it the boundaries and ask it to come up with some language that fills the gaps. It'll do 80% of the work very quickly. So it wouldn't take much now for someone with a little bit of spare time to take the model and at least give a better version to work with. But then I think it needs to be worked through with another group. Probably to re-engage with the Q community, dust it off, have someone fresh lead on this, and maybe catch up with what did happen on NHS England, NHS Improvement. I don't know where that got to, but I couldn't find anything when I searched for it. Again, technology, and thanks to COVID partly, has meant that we can do a whole lot more visually with tools like Mural or Miro. So the idea of a digital version of this board, where people move counters around and things, and you have to find some creative ways of recording the data, it would be something that you could definitely do. And of course, it would still be great, I think, to link the conversations and the scoring to some shared resource that can be co-populated, if you like, with good stuff. to make that piece work and help people on their sort of journey. And then whatever level of facilitation, support, reporting, celebrating might be needed around that. So that would be my kind of top 4 things that would be great to happen next from my perspective. But that was you may have other views, I think. Oh no, there's a 5th thing. I forgot that. Quite important thing. The idea to create, maybe it may be that the NHS in all its beauty and ugliness isn't ready for a totally wide open kind of bench sharing, bench learning, benchmarking environment where you can see the scores of everybody relative to everybody else. That may be a bridge too far. It is for many other organizations. But if there was some way of saying, these are the scores for my trust, just tell me who are the trusts that are a little bit ahead of me on these particular aspects that I want to improve. So a much safer, more positive version of kind of safe benchmarking, if you like, where I just get to see who I can learn from and no one gets to see where I am in the league table, quotes. So I think we probably need to rethink through the psychological safety around the nakedness of offering up our scoring to each other. So there's another thing there to probably think through. And that was the final thing. So I've blathered on for a little while, but hopefully that gives you a bit of the history and the intent and the heart behind the original game, if you can call it a game. And it would be brilliant if in this group or beyond, somebody could pick this up and run with it, because I still think there's something here. I was in a conversation, just in closing, with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent societies, who have 191 national societies, and they're trying to work on kind of a different kind of improvement, but with all of them, kind of excellence approach. And they're just about to take this model and say, well, if we could do this, not your model, but the approach, if we could do this with 191 countries and have them self-assess, benchmark, and then connect them together. So it's definitely, the principle is there. So I think the spirit is willing, but whether the flesh is too weak to do anything, I don't know. But anyway, enough from me. Matthew, let me bounce back to you. I'll go and read the chat now and see what you've been saying, and happy to respond to any questions. But I think you guys have got more answers than me.
Thanks, Chris. Fabulous overview of the river diagram approach and the QI capabilities sort of application of it. And one thing that did come up in the chat already is, how does this relate to NHS impact as well? And I know you did have a bit of a look at NHS impact and made a sort of almost like a dummy. Well, it used some real data, to be honest, that I had from self-assessments that people had done, mixed in with random sort of made up data. But if anyone, I know a few people were saying they'd like to see that, and I can share that sort of Excel dot. But does anyone have any questions, any clarifications, anything they'd like to ask Chris? Either sort of jump in or put your hand up using the React button. And also, if there is, if you feel that you'd like to use the QI capabilities framework that Chris has mentioned, we were thinking that we could potentially just try and put it onto Miro so that it becomes something you could easily use as a template with your teams and digital version, and wouldn't have to post these hard. They are quite lovely, but there's only 2 hard copies of the actual game around at the moment, so it's a bit sort of limited how many people could do it. But any questions, suggestions, clarifications, anything for Chris?
Actually, just while you're thinking, I'll just show you very briefly. I've managed to find, Matthew, the kind of the mock-up river diagram thing that I did do for NHS Impact. So which was a bit sort of quick and dirty, but it gives you an idea. So this was I think this is the thing you were referring to. So you kind of very simply just pop your data in here for the different trusts, and then you get the overall big picture, and then you can go through trust by trust and see the current score, the target score, and then you could look at the end at particular kind of capabilities and see, these are the green ones, these are the red ones, these are the conversations where there's the most kind of potential energy, if you like, for something to go on. So that was the kind of the mock-up that we did. Joe,
thanks.
Over to you.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Chris and Matthew. Thank you for sharing around the river diagram. Matthew, you had previously sent me it to NHS Impact, but with all of the diagrams, it was really hard for me to comprehend. And so, kind of, Chris, your story of how that river diagram had come about, and it has been really useful to kind of bring that to life. So I kind of get it a little bit more now, seeing it on screen. I do think that the benefit of that river diagram is that comparison, and then
Have you
that
met
support.
Hazel? I think it's Hazel still on the respiratory. Yeah.
And the support that you can either give from different organisations. I just wondered whether, in terms of a QI capabilities aspect, this can be done as an individual level. I wasn't quite sure whether this was individuals kind of rating themselves in that self-assessment and then seeking support to kind of push kind of their capabilities and where to seek that from, or whether this was more organisational, a little bit like the NHS Impact is.
It was designed to be organizational. It was very much, whilst people might volunteer their own viewpoint, and where you place your card is your view, very democratically. The idea was that a team, whatever the appropriate level would be, and it was the language was an attempt to work at multiple levels, would then agree themselves, okay, overall we think we're actually level 3, but we recognise that in that, for you were a level 2 or whatever. But it was supposed to be around team capability, just to try and steer it clear of individual competency frameworks and not kind of muddy the water. Sometimes that becomes a confusion for people.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lou, I don't know if you were next.
Oh yeah, sorry. Also, I wasn't on mute just now, and I'm in the office. So sorry about background noise. That was me. I just wanted to say a huge thank you, Chris. It's really interesting to me, and it feels really nice because it feels like it connects in with storytelling, and I like that, and that sort of that flow and sort of transfer of information. I really love the imagery that goes with it. I was just wondering, talking really loud with 2 ears in, the spreadsheet you just shared, have you got a version of that is shareable? Because I'm thinking that would be really useful to use with maybe the different wards and the different departments, and start to, because we're just about to embark on a big stakeholder analysis piece of work. And actually, if we could go out and get that intel, I think that would be really beneficial for us to then start to identify, where our priority places to work.
Oh, I hate it when I do that. Why do I show things as a consultant and then people ask them for them? Yeah, that's fine. I'll send it to you. I mean, it's a very limited kind of mock-up.
Is it a paid for thing, Chris?
It's yeah. I'll be general. If I send it to Matthew, and then it's probably the easiest route because I won't have your details. But yeah, you're welcome to have a play with it. But do please treat it as a limited kind of, here's how you could put together something fancy. I mean,
yeah.
If you've got Power BI or some other tools available to you, then I would push it beyond Excel so that others can add stuff. But it kind of works, and it'll illustrate it for you. You're very welcome to that.
Thank you.
Any more questions or clarification? I know we were going to try and keep this to 45 minutes, so we still got just 3 more minutes. But if someone else does have a question,
I can overrun a bit if you need to. Don't worry about that.
I mean, yeah, well, that's great. So Chris can overrun a bit. But any more? I mean, I wasn't quite sure. Was there? I know someone. Oh gosh, who was it? In the chat was saying they'd love to see the QI capabilities one, the Q Exchange project, transferred to Miro. I mean, I think I'm not a great Miro person, but I'd be happy with colleagues at Q or something to try and do that. But only if some team actually would use it. I don't want to try and do all the moving hundreds of cards and bits and bobs onto Miro just for fun. But yeah, it was you, wasn't it, Lindsay? But are you thinking that your team might give it a go?
Yes. That was a very confident yes, wasn't it?
Okay, you all heard that. Well, yeah. So I guess we will. Are you good with Miro? I mean, well, I don't know. One way or another, I'll work out a way, and we'll put the sort of the big kind of framework game, and then it would need lots of cards and tokens and things, but it should all work on Miro, I think. And then presumably we could just turn it into put it into the Miro template library, and then sort of every improver on the planet would have access to it. So so I think maybe we should try that, and Lindsay can be our guinea pig to see whether it really works on Miro well or not.
So Matthew, I suppose there's two things from my perspective. There's the team side of it, which really I'm really interested in. But we're really lucky that we're in something called a foundation group with 4 other trusts, of which some of my colleagues are on the call today, and we've been emailing in the background. So that river, looking to be able to compare in a psychologically safe environment, we've actually got with 4 NHS trusts. So there's, from an NHS impact perspective and those high level NHS impact perspectives, there's also something there that we're just starting to think about as well in the last 35 minutes. So
maybe we should all talk off Zoom about whether it's the NHS, because the thing Chris was really showing was the QI capabilities one, but it can all be applied to NHS impact, which Chris did a rough version of, which I think might have missed off one cape. I think one way or another between me and Chris, we made one tiny flaw, but it's very fixable, because a few people have been looking at it in relation to NHS impact. But yeah, we'll maybe reconnect off after the Zoom. Any further question? Oh gosh, a last very quick question before I stop recording and say farewell. No, good. So that means we can stop on time, but feel free. I'm going to turn off the recording actually.